Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking all the research, the source material, and the expert notes, and we're using them to unpack something. Well, something we all think we know very well. Our own minds.
It's a journey into what you could call cognitive humility.
Hmm.
I mean, we all walk around with this default assumption that our minds are basically reliable.
Right. That we see what's really there, that we remember things accurately, that we can trust our own gut feelings.
Exactly. But our sources for this deep dive, which lean really heavily on the work of cognitive scientists Christopher Chabris and Daniel Simons, show that these gut feelings, these common sense beliefs are, well, they're actually deep-seated psychological illusions.
So let's unpack that. Our mission here is to give you a kind of shortcut to understanding these powerful and, frankly, often really counterintuitive limits of how we perceive the world. Yeah. We're going to break down 6 of these everyday illusions that make us misjudge pretty much everything from, how safe we are on our daily commute all the way to how competent our leaders actually are.
And the stakes here they're really profound. Because we're not talking about simple mental glitches that you can just fix by, trying harder or having more willpower.
No.
These are fundamental trade-offs in how our cognitive system is built. It's an efficient system, but it has trade-offs. So the goal isn't to eliminate these limits, but to recognize them, because they affect nearly every part of your life.
They really do. I mean, they can decide the outcome of a court case.
Or the success of a billion-dollar project. It's that serious.
And maybe the single best illustration of this kind of built-in mental failure is the one that gives the whole experiment its name, the invisible gorilla.
So we have to start there with the gorilla.
Yeah.
For anyone who maybe hasn't come across this piece of foundational cognitive science before, the beauty of it is its simplicity.
It's incredibly simple, and that's what makes the results so shocking.
Tell us how it works. How was the experiment set up?
Okay, so the whole design is meant to put your cognitive system under a bit of pressure. You're asked to watch a short video. It's only about 75 seconds long.
Right. On the screen, you see 2 teams of people. One team is wearing white shirts, the other is in black shirts. And they're all moving around, walking, passing basketballs to their teammates.
Okay, so a lot of movement. And what's the instruction for the viewer?
The task is what creates the pressure. They tell you to silently count the number of passes made only by the players wearing white shirts.
Ah, so you have to really focus. You're filtering out a huge amount of what you're seeing.
A huge amount. You're actively trying to ignore the black team. You're ignoring people just walking around.
Yeah.
You're focused on one thing. White shirts, basketball, count.
So your attention is being artificially narrowed down onto this one pretty difficult visual tracking task.
Exactly. And then, about halfway through the video, something unexpected happens.
The gorilla.
The gorilla. A person in a full-body gorilla suit walks right into the middle of the game.
Not just quickly, right?
No, not at all. They stroll right in, stop in the center of all the players, turn to face the camera, thump their chest.
Thumps its chest.
And then just walk slowly off the other side of the screen. The whole thing, the gorilla is fully visible for about 9 seconds.
9 full seconds of a chest-thumping gorilla in the absolute center of your vision. And the result is what made this experiment legendary.
Yes. Roughly half.
Yeah.
50% of all the people who watch the video fail to see the gorilla.
They just miss it.
They look right at it. Their eyes, their retinas are registering the image. But because their cognitive attention, their mental resources, are completely used up by the counting task, the gorilla never breaks through into their conscious awareness.
So this is a failure of the mind, not a failure of the eyes. And the scientific name for this is inattentional blindness.
That's it. You fail to notice an unexpected and, pretty obvious object because your attention is just focused so intensely somewhere else. It proves that what we experience as vision is fundamentally selective.
Right. We have this feeling, this illusion that we're taking in the world like a high-definition movie.
We think we see it all. But in reality, our cognitive resources are tiny. We can only consciously attend to a few things at a time. The rest. The brain's filter just discards it.
I remember reading about the reactions of the subjects after they were told what they missed. That part is almost as revealing as the result itself.
Oh, it absolutely is. They're often just incredulous. They get angry. They accuse the experimenter of swapping the tape.
You must have shown me a different video.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that disbelief, that resistance, it confirms the power of the illusion. Because in their conscious experience, they were seeing. They saw the players. They saw the ball. So they make this logical leap that they must have seen everything important.
And there was a survey on this too, wasn't there?
There was. It found that over 75% of people believe, they're confident, that they would notice an unexpected event like a gorilla, even if they were focused on something else. It's a powerful testament to how stubborn this illusion is.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense in a controlled lab setting. But you mentioned earlier that this has huge real-world consequences. It's even led to people being convicted of crimes based on a total misunderstanding of how our perception works. Let's talk about the case of Officer Kenny Conley.
The Conley case it's a really chilling example of this. It happened back in 1995 in Boston. It's a real-life, inattentional blindness situation that was interpreted by a jury as a criminal lie.
So what was the scene?
It was chaos. A high-stakes police chase that ends in a cul-de-sac. An undercover officer named Michael Cox, he's in plain clothes, just jeans and a dark hoodie, is chasing a suspect over a chain-link fence.
And in all that confusion, Cox gets mistaken for a suspect himself, and he's brutally beaten by his own fellow officers.
Precisely. The assault is happening right there, near the fence. And this is the exact moment that Officer Kenny Conley arrives on the scene. His mind is completely locked onto one goal.
Catch the suspect.
Catch the fleeing murder suspect, a man named Smut Brown. So Conley scales the same fence, runs right past the area where the beating is taking place, and continues his pursuit of Brown.
So when the investigation starts, he's questioned. And he testifies that he saw nothing. No assault, no injured officer.
Right, and the prosecutors, and later the jury, they just didn't believe him. How could they?
It's happening right there, literally feet away from him.
To them, it seemed impossible to miss. So the only logical conclusion was that he was lying, that he was covering for his fellow officers, upholding the quote-unquote blue wall of silence.
And even Conley himself seemed to doubt his own perception.
He did. Under oath, he was struggling. He said things like, "I think I would have seen that, and I should have." The jury just relied on their own intuition, their own everyday illusion. A trained police officer looks at a scene, they see everything important.
But the cognitive science says that's just not how it works. It suggests Conley might have genuinely, truly not seen the assault.
It's a very plausible explanation. The scientific argument is that his cognitive resources were completely hijacked by the primary high-stakes task: catch a murderer. This creates an extreme form of tunnel vision.
So the visual information of the beating, even though it was right there and dramatic, was unexpected in that context.
It was unexpected, so his brain filtered it out as irrelevant to his central mission. He was looking for the suspect, and everything else became invisible.
That's a staggering thought. A jury condemned him. He was convicted of perjury and obstruction of justice, all because their own intuition about how vision works was fundamentally wrong.
Yes, and that misunderstanding is the default for most of us. His conviction was eventually overturned on some procedural grounds, but that initial judgment call rested entirely on the illusion of attention. It forces us to accept that looking is just not the same as seeing.
Especially not under high cognitive load.
Absolutely.
And that idea of high cognitive load brings us straight to a modern, everyday safety issue: driving while distracted. I think most people, if you ask them, would say that using a hands-free phone is safer than holding one. Why is that a dangerous myth?
It's a myth because people are confusing two different kinds of distraction. They think the problem is mechanical.
The physical act of holding the phone?
Right, but holding a phone or steering a car, that takes very little cognitive effort for an experienced driver. The real problem is the conversation itself. That's what eats up our limited attentional resources.
And that consumption of attention leads directly to inattentional blindness when you're behind the wheel.
Without a doubt, the research here is crystal clear. The level of distraction caused by a deep conversation, even if it's hands-free, is comparable to driving while legally intoxicated.
Wow.
Drivers on the phone miss critical visual cues. They're slower to react to brake lights. They can't maintain a consistent speed or distance from the car in front of them. Their eyes are on the road, but their mind is somewhere else entirely.
And there's experimental proof for this, tying it right back to the gorilla task.
Yes, there is. Researchers had participants do a tracking task on a screen, which is sort of like driving. The control group, just doing the tracking, missed an unexpected red cross. The video game version of the gorilla, about 30% of the time.
Okay, so even just focusing was hard.
It is. But then they had another group do the same tracking task while also having a conversation on a cell phone. That group missed the unexpected red cross 90% of the time.
90, so it tripled the rate of inattention.
A tripling. And the most insidious part of this, as you mentioned, is that the drivers themselves often feel totally fine. They don't feel impaired.
Because they can still do the basic mechanics. They can stay in their lane.
Exactly. The routine motor tasks feel normal. but they've become blind to the rare, unexpected, and potentially catastrophic event. The child who runs into the street, the sudden red light, the deer on the highway. The illusion of attention reassures them that they're safe, while the science proves they're critically dangerously impaired.
And this even happens to highly trained experts. You hear about expert blindness, for example, in radiology. You'd think a professional who stares at images all day would be trained to see everything.
Yeah, that's the common sense expectation, and it's another facet of the illusion. Radiologists are experts, yes, but they're trained to detect expected targets.
Tumors, fractures, specific diseases.
Right. Their attention is intensely focused on the goal of that specific examination. So if an unexpected anomaly appears, even if it's glaringly obvious in hindsight, they can miss it completely.
Like a surgical tool that was left inside a patient, visible on an X-ray, but the radiologist was scanning for signs of pneumonia.
That's a classic example. There was a famous case where a patient had a guide wire left in their femoral vein. It was clearly visible on 3 different X-rays and a CT scan. Multiple, highly trained doctors missed it because they were looking for something else. They were looking for pulmonary edema. So they focused their attention on the lungs, on the expected targets, and the huge unexpected anomaly, the guide wire, was just cognitively filtered out. This is what fuels so many malpractice lawsuits, where a jury looks at the image and thinks, well, it's right there. The doctor must have seen it.
And to take this to the absolute highest stakes, there's the USS Greenville accident, the commander of a nuclear submarine doing a periscope scan before surfacing, and he fails to see a Japanese fishing vessel, the Ahima Maru. The collision was fatal.
That might be the ultimate example of looking without seeing. The commander, Scott Wadd, he stated that he looked in the direction of the vessel. He scanned that sector, but he just failed to detect it.
So what was his attention on?
In that moment, his attention was likely directed at other things. The internal procedures of the submarine, the checklist, the speed, the depth changes. He was searching for expected threats, like a high-speed vessel. We're just focusing on procedural compliance. The unexpected, slower-moving fishing boat was filtered out, even though his eyes were physically looking right at it through the periscope.
The sheer depth of this illusion of attention is just... it's staggering. It means we can't trust our own perception when our minds are occupied. But if we can't trust what we're seeing right now, what on earth does that mean for what we think we saw in the past?
And that is the perfect transition. Because if our attention is that limited, then the raw data we're feeding into our memory banks is already incomplete. It's compromised from the start. The illusion of attention leads directly to the next great cognitive failing, the illusion of memory.
So we tend to think of memory as this perfect archive, right? Like a digital video recorder that we can just rewind and play back.
Yeah.
But the sources we've looked at say this is completely fundamentally wrong.
It's the core flaw in how we intuitively understand memory. We assume fidelity, we assume it's a recording, but it's not. Recollection is a highly fluid and reconstructive process.
Reconstructive, what does that mean exactly?
It means when you recall an event, your brain doesn't just pull up a file and play it. It rapidly rebuilds the scene from scratch. It takes a few sparse, maybe accurate details it stored, and then it blends them with context, with your general expectations, and with a whole lot of inferences about what should have happened.
So it sounds like our brain is constantly filling in the gaps with plausible fiction.
It absolutely is. We call this a tendency toward false consistency. There's a classic psychology experiment that demonstrates this perfectly. You show people a picture of a typical academic's office.
Okay.
Then later, you ask them to recall the objects in the room. Now, the trick is, the experimental office was deliberately stripped of things you'd expect to see. But people will consistently recall seeing file cabinets or lots of books or maybe a globe.
Even though they weren't there.
Even though they weren't there. Because their cognitive schema, their mental template for professor's office, demands that those things be present. So the brain just adds them in to make the memory feel complete.
And if the actual data is sparse, the brain just grabs the nearest template to fill the void. This must be why we see such massive distortions in memories of conflicts, like that notorious Bobby Knight choking incident.
Oh, that's a perfect case study. That confrontation in 1997 between Coach Knight and his player Neil Reed, it's just compelling evidence of how memory gets distorted to fit a personal narrative.
So you have Reed, the 20-year-old player. How did he remember it?
Reed remembered it vividly. For him, it was a major traumatic event. He recalled being violently grabbed by the throat, and he specifically remembered needing 2 assistant coaches to intervene, to physically separate them like we were in a schoolyard fight.
And Knight's memory was the polar opposite.
Knight's memory was that it was unremarkable. He either recalled nothing at all, or he downplayed it as just trivial physical contact, something totally consistent with his very demanding physical coaching style. So both men's memories were fundamentally warped to fit their roles in the story.
And then, years later, the video evidence actually surfaced. What did it show?
The tape showed that Knight did, in fact, grab Reed by the front of the neck, and it was pretty aggressive. But crucially, no coaches intervened.
Nobody broke it up.
They just stood there and watched. So Reed was right about the choking, but his memory of the intervention, which he described as being just as real as the choking itself, that was totally false. It was an inferred detail. His brain added it because the trauma he felt demanded a dramatic intervention. Knight, meanwhile, had just erased the severity completely to maintain his own behavioral consistency.
It's just astonishing that two people can be in the exact same event and have such wildly different yet equally confident memories. This whole reconstructive process, this reliance on schemas, it must also explain why we're so susceptible to change blindness.
Change blindness, right? That's our failure to notice substantial, often really obvious, changes in our visual environment after some kind of brief interruption. Movie buffs see this all the time with continuity errors.
Like a character's shirt changes color between shots, or a scar appears and disappears.
Exactly. They seem so obvious when you're looking for them, but when the film is just running normally, we almost always miss them.
So why are we so blind to these changes?
It's because our cognitive system is efficient, not comprehensive. It doesn't store all the visual details of a scene. It only stores a very sparse representation, just enough information to get the job done. So when your focus shifts, you're not comparing the new scene pixel by pixel with a stored photograph. You're just updating the relevant information.
And the illusion within the illusion is what researchers call change blindness. Blindness. We're blind to our own blindness.
Yes. In those classic film studies, after they'd missed all the errors, subjects were told about them. And when they were asked if they would have noticed them, over 70% confidently said, "Oh yeah, I would have spotted the major ones." We just lack the self-awareness to recognize how little information we actually hold onto from one moment to the next.
But the best proof of this has to be the door study. It takes this illusion out of the lab and puts it into a real dynamic social situation.
The door study was brilliant, just brilliant. A researcher walks up to a random person on a college campus and asks for directions.
Okay, a normal interaction.
A totally normal interaction.
All right.
But while the person is busy explaining the directions, two workers carrying a big wooden door walk right between them. It only takes a few seconds. And in that moment, the researcher asking for directions is swapped out for a completely different person.
Different height, different voice, different clothes.
A totally different person, and the result.
The person giving directions rarely notices.
Most of them completely fail to notice the swap, even though they're mid-sentence talking to this person. It confirms that the brain only processed the superficial information. Young man, casually dressed, which remained consistent. The specific details of his face, his voice, they were never stored in deep memory because they weren't needed for the task of giving directions.
That has huge implications for trying to identify someone from a brief, chaotic encounter. But what about professionals? Like a script supervisor on a movie set. Their entire job is to spot these errors. Can they overcome this flaw?
That's the key question. And the answer is, they don't overcome the core cognitive limitation, but they develop strategies to work around it. Take Trudy Ramirez. She's a veteran script supervisor. She says that even though she has a great visual memory, she knows it's shockingly fallible.
So she doesn't trust her own memory.
She never trusts it. She takes tons of notes, photos. She has a system. And the reason she does this is because she gets immediate painful feedback when her memory fails.
Right. An error in a movie costs the production time and money.
Exactly. So that constant feedback loop forces her to rely on external aids, on a system, instead of her own internal intuitive confidence. It's a rare kind of self-awareness that's born from repeated failure.
Okay, let's shift to those memories that feel the most real, the most vivid. The flashbulb memories, like where you were on 9/11 or when the Challenger exploded. That vividness makes us absolutely certain of their accuracy.
And that vividness is the very mechanism of the illusion. Researchers who tracked people after the Challenger disaster had them write down their memories right after it happened.
So they had a baseline.
A perfect baseline. When they re-interviewed those same people years later, their vivid emotional recollections were often drastically different from what they had originally written down.
And when they were confronted with their own handwriting from the day after the event.
They would often still cling to their current powerful memory. They'd reject the factual evidence of their own original report. That's a mechanism researchers call believe now. The emotional power of the current reconstructed memory is so high that it just overrides the documented facts. The memory has been unconsciously edited over time to create a better, more cohesive story.
That must be why President George W. Bush recalled seeing the first plane hit the World Trade Center on live TV.
Yeah.
That footage wasn't broadcast until much, much later.
His memory wasn't a lie, it was reconstructive. His mind took the details of the first impact and combined them with the later broadcasts of the second impact to create a single plausible, emotionally resonant narrative. The brain prioritizes a good story over factual fidelity.
And this reconstruction also leads to source memory errors, where we basically steal someone else's memory and think it's our own.
It's remarkably easy to do. You hear a vivid story from someone else, and if it aligns with your own life in some way, your mind can just appropriate it. There's the case of Ken Norman, who confidently told this charming anecdote about meeting the actor Patrick Stewart.
But it had actually happened to Chris, one of the authors.
Right. Ken had heard the story, enjoyed it, and because it was so compelling, his mind just filed it away as his own experience.
Or the author who was accused of plagiarizing a story about a Christmas pageant, but he was convinced it happened to his own son.
Neil Donald Walsh. He had told that heartwarming story so many times that he had fully internalized it as his own lived experience. The memory felt vivid, so in his mind it had to be true. The illusion of memory basically guarantees that our confidence and the vividness of a memory are often terrible, terrible indicators of its accuracy.
Okay, so we've established that our attention is flawed, and our memory is basically a fiction writer. Now we have to deal with the illusion of confidence, which says that on top of all that, we don't even know how capable or accurate we are.
No, we really don't. We chronically, systematically overestimate our own knowledge and our own abilities. The most extreme, almost cartoonish example of this is the bank robber MacArthur Wheeler.
The lemon juice guy.
A lemon juice guy. He smeared lemon juice all over his face because he believed it would make him invisible to security cameras. He was supremely confident in a completely, utterly flawed idea.
And this combination of total incompetence paired with supreme overconfidence is now famously known as the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Exactly. The core insight of Dunning-Kruger is that incompetence is a double curse. First, unskilled people obviously make more mistakes. But second, they lack the very metacognitive skill, the knowledge of that subject, to even recognize how badly they're performing.
They're too incompetent to see their own incompetence.
That's the curse. It means the people who are most in need of self-doubt are the least likely to have any.
And on the flip side, the real experts are often underconfident.
Because they're acutely aware of the vast complexity of their field, of all things they don't know. The illusion of confidence, though, lets most of us float along comfortably in the middle, just assuming our intuition and common sense are good enough.
But we value confidence so much in our culture. We see it as a sign of competence. We promote confident people. We trust them.
We do. But the research shows that psychologically, confidence is a remarkably stable personality trait, almost like height. It's highly heritable, and it's often completely unrelated to a person's actual accuracy, their knowledge, or their intelligence.
So a person who is confident about one thing is likely to be confident about everything, whether they know about it or not.
That's right. In general knowledge trivia tests, for example, the high confidence people are no more accurate than the low confidence people. Yet we are absolutely wired to treat that outward projection of confidence as an honest signal of inner truth.
And this preference for certainty has really dangerous results in high-stakes environments, like in politics.
Absolutely. Think about the big decisions, like the lead-up to the war in Iraq. Leaders are leaning heavily on expressions of confidence. When the CIA director, George Tenet, famously said the intelligence on WMDs was a slam dunk.
That phrase carried immense weight.
Immense. It was an expression of certainty that dramatically influenced policymakers, including President Bush. We are so inclined to take that high-level confidence as proof of solid knowledge, especially when the alternative admitting uncertainty is so uncomfortable.
We see the same thing in medicine, and it can actively harm patients.
The doctor dilemma is a huge one. Patients overwhelmingly prefer doctors who act certain. In the book, Chris talks about his doctor treating him for Lyme disease. She openly consulted a reference book twice to double-check the dosage and the treatment plan.
And his initial reaction was anxiety.
A jolt of anxiety. He mistook her carefulness, her due diligence, for incompetence.
Even though she ended up giving him the exact right treatment that cured him.
Precisely. And studies confirm this. Patients consistently rate confident, decisive doctors as more satisfying, and the ones who express doubt or look something up as the least satisfying. This creates a really damaging confidence cycle.
Where doctors learn to fake it.
They learn to project certainty, even when they have internal doubts, because that's what satisfies the patient's emotional need for an expert. But true medical competence, so often, requires the humility to say, I'm not sure, let me double check.
This brings us to the most tragic place where the illusion of confidence and the illusion of memory crash into each other. Eyewitness testimony in a courtroom.
The case of Jennifer Thompson and Ronald Cotton is it's devastating. And it's become the paradigm for this systemic failure. Back in 1984, Thompson was raped. During the attack, she made a conscious, deliberate, harrowing effort to memorize her attacker's face.
She was trying to do everything right. She believed her focus would guarantee an accurate memory.
Of course. And so she confidently identified Ronald Cotton, not just once.
Multiple times.
She picked him from a photo array. She picked him from a live lineup. And then finally, she stood up in court, pointed at him, and told the jury she was absolutely sure he was the man. Her unwavering, articulate confidence was the single most persuasive piece of evidence that convicted him.
He was sentenced to life in prison with almost no other physical evidence.
That's right. But years later, DNA testing proved her completely, certainly wrong.
It wasn't him.
It wasn't him. The DNA exonerated Cotton and identified the actual perpetrator, a man named Bobby Poole, who happened to look somewhat similar to Cotton. Thompson's confident memory was a total failure of reconstruction, likely influenced by suggestion and reinforcement during the identification process. But the jury, they relied on that powerful illusion that high confidence means high accuracy.
But is there any link between confidence and accuracy? Is it completely random?
No, not completely. Statistically, across large groups, confident witnesses are more likely to be accurate than unconfident ones. The ratio is something like 70% accuracy for confident witnesses versus 30% for unconfident ones.
Okay, so there is a correlation.
There is correlation. But the critical, life-altering mistake is when a juror takes that general statistical trend and applies it as a certainty to one single, compelling, confident individual like Jennifer Thompson. An individual expression of confidence is just too unreliable. And in that case, it ruined an innocent man's life.
That's a profound lesson. We have to learn to systematically distrust high confidence, both in ourselves and in others, especially when we're talking about past events or future predictions. So we've torn down these three major personal illusions: attention, memory, and confidence. Let's broaden out now to how these internal flaws create massive external failures in things like judgment and planning, starting with the illusion of knowledge.
The illusion of knowledge is this really dangerous tendency we have to confuse familiarity with genuine understanding.
I know how to use it, so I think I know how it works.
That's it, exactly. We can operate complex systems every day, but we mistake that operational familiarity for real mechanical or scientific expertise.
This is sometimes called the why game, right? We all know how to use a toilet or a zipper, but if someone challenged you to explain the precise mechanics of a siphon or how the teeth of a zipper interlock,
You'd realize very quickly that your knowledge is incredibly shallow. We mistake the surface-level interface of a system for the deep mechanics that make it function. This leads us to chronically overestimate how much we actually understand.
ask someone, how does a bicycle work? They can describe pedaling and turning the handlebars.
Right, but ask them to draw the chain mechanism correctly, or explain the physics of gyroscopic stability that keeps it upright, and most people fail profoundly.
And this confusion, this overestimation of our own knowledge depth, it happens even to the world's top experts. It leads to some staggering errors in prediction.
Oh, absolutely. Take the Human Genome Project. Before it was completed, geneticists, the world's leading experts on the topic, were asked to predict how many genes they'd find in human DNA. Their average prediction was a hugely confident 66,050 genes.
And the real number wasn't even close.
Not even in the same ballpark. The final consensus number for protein-coding genes settled at around 20,500. A massive, massive overestimation. The experts simply did not know what they thought they knew.
And we see this pattern throughout history. Early AI researchers.
In the 1950s, computer scientists confidently predicted that a machine would beat the world chess champion within 10 years.
A prediction that was off by about 3 decades. Deep Blue didn't beat Kasparov until 1997. This failure to accurately assess our own knowledge depth is directly linked to something called the planning fallacy.
The planning fallacy is our pervasive, almost universal failure to accurately predict the time, the cost, and the resources it'll take to complete a future task. And this applies even to tasks you've done successfully before.
It's part optimism, but also part illusion of knowledge. We underestimate just how many unexpected things can and will go wrong.
You see it most dramatically in huge public works projects.
The Sydney Opera House.
A perfect example. It was projected to cost 7 million Australian dollars in 1960. By the time it was finally finished, the cost had ballooned to 102 million.
Or the Boston Big Dig.
America's most expensive highway project. The initial projection was around $6 billion. The final price tag was nearly $15 billion. These are chronic, systemic failures to account for unforeseen complexity.
So when we plan something, we naturally take an inside view. We focus on our own optimistic story of how it's going to go.
Right, and we ignore the outside view, which is the cold, hard historical data of how thousands of similar projects have actually turned out. Our internal narrative, which is fueled by confidence, tells us that our project will be the exception. We forget that the historical failure rate for, say, large IT project is often well over 50%.
So the solution isn't to try to get better at estimating your own project.
No. The solution is to ignore your internal optimism completely and just look at the historical data. Assume your project will perform like the average project, not like the one amazing success story.
Okay, let's move to the illusion of cause. This is about our mind's incredibly powerful, innate tendency to see patterns and create causal stories, even where there's only randomness.
It starts with a phenomenon called apophenia. That's the experience of seeing meaningful patterns or connections in random or meaningless data.
Seeing faces in toast.
Seeing faces in toast, or the Virgin Mary on a stained wall. That's the visual version, pareidolia. Our brains are wired to connect dots. It's a survival mechanism, but sometimes it connects dots that simply aren't there.
And we have this compulsive need to assume that if event B happened after event A, then A must have caused B.
That cognitive shortcut is so powerful, and it created the perfect storm that fueled the false belief, linking the MMR vaccine to autism.
Because the timing lines up.
The timing lines up perfectly. The symptoms of autism often become developmentally noticeable around the same age that a child receives the MMR vaccine. It's a clear chronological pattern. So parents observe this timing and very intuitively inferred a causal link.
And this is despite the fact that study after study, looking at hundreds of thousands of children, have found absolutely no statistical association.
The scientific data becomes completely irrelevant when you're up against a single, compelling, personal, causal story. That anecdote, my child was fine, then he got the shot, and then he regressed. It's emotionally powerful, it's sticky, and it provides a simple, satisfying explanation for something terrifying.
It's what Mother Teresa said. If I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will.
A personal story will trump abstract data every single time.
It's the ultimate failure of critical thinking, because that simple chronological sequence is enough to satisfy the brain. It's basically Homer Simpson's logic.
It is the classic example from the show. Homer buys a special rock from Lisa that supposedly keeps tigers away. He holds it up and says, "Well, I don't see any tigers around here, do you?"
He's attributing a non-event, no tigers showing up, to his non-causal intervention, the rock, just because the timeline works.
And we do this all the time. When an investment goes bad, we look back and find the exact news story that caused the market to turn, even if the two events are totally unrelated. We need a cause. We invent one if we have to.
Finally, we have to tackle the illusion of potential. This is that really seductive belief that we all have these vast, untapped mental powers just waiting to be unlocked, preferably with very little effort.
It feeds our deep hope that we can get smarter, or boost our memory, or enhance our attention without all the hard work. The most famous example of this is the Mozart effect.
Right. The study that suggested listening to Mozart for 10 minutes could temporarily boost your IQ score by 9 points.
And the media just ran with it. It led to a whole industry of consumer products, CDs for babies, even state policies promoting classical music in daycares.
Because the demand for an easy shortcut to intelligence is immense.
It is. But of course, independent meta-analyses failed to replicate those dramatic gains. The tiny marginal effect they did find, about 1.4 IQ points, was almost certainly just due to temporary improvements in mood and arousal from listening to pleasant music, not any real cognitive enhancement. But the illusion persists because the idea of effortless self-improvement is just too appealing to let go of.
And this illusion is what keeps that myth alive that we only use 10% of our brain.
That's pure cognitive folklore. It's completely untrue. We use all of our brain. Brain scans like fMRIs show that even when you're resting, huge percentages of your brain are metabolically active. There is no dormant 90% just waiting to be switched on.
The same goes for hypnosis, unlocking perfect memories.
Right. Hypnosis can make memories feel more frequent and more vivid, but it does not make them more accurate. In fact, it often just increases a person's confidence in their false recollections.
So what about all the modern brain training software and video games that claim to make you smarter or more focused?
Well, the adult brain is plastic. It can change. But the illusion of potential is that this change is easy and broadly transferable. The research shows that if you practice a specific memory game, you get better at that specific memory game.
But it doesn't necessarily make you better at remembering your grocery list.
There's very limited evidence of broad transfer, that getting better in one area automatically makes you better in a totally different area. Sure, playing action video games might enhance your visual selective attention, but the illusion is believing that playing Medal of Honor for an hour means you're now inherently better at studying for your calculus exam. Significant, lasting cognitive improvement requires intensive, deliberate practice targeted at the actual skill you want to master.
This has been a sobering look at the real architecture of our minds. We've covered these 6 fundamental illusions: attention, memory, confidence, knowledge, cause, and potential. So if we know we're this easily fooled, what's the practical, actionable takeaway from all of this?
Well, the goal can't be to eliminate these limitations. They're the necessary trade-offs that make our brains fast and efficient most of the time. The goal has to be developing the self-awareness to recognize when these illusions are most likely to lead us astray.
It's about switching from our fast, intuitive thinking, what some call System 1, to our slower, more reflective, analytical thinking, System 2.
Right? Proactively engaging that slower system to check and correct our flawed intuitions.
That sounds good in theory, but how do we actually do that in a high-speed world? What are some concrete recommendations from the evidence we've just discussed?
Okay, so for the illusion of attention, you have to restructure your environment. Don't rely on willpower to ignore your phone when you're driving. That will fail.
Remove the temptation.
Remove it entirely. Put the phone in the trunk, put it in the glove compartment. And because we know that looking isn't the same as seeing, force yourself to use external aids. Use checklists, even for tasks you feel like an expert in. This is especially critical in high-stakes fields like medicine or aviation.
And what about combating the illusions of memory and confidence?
You have to systematically distrust your most vivid memories. And you have to systematically distrust the most confident people, especially in a legal setting or when you're planning for the future.
With the planning fallacy.
With the planning fallacy, you must ignore your internal estimate. You have to. Instead, you base your timelines and your budgets solely on the external historical data of how similar projects have actually performed in the past. You have to assume your project will fail at the average rate, not succeed like the one you read about.
And finally, how do we resist that powerful pull of a good causal story and the lure of easy potential?
You have to demand genuine evidence for every causal link you're presented with, especially the ones that come in the form of a compelling personal story. Don't confuse correlation or simple chronology with causation. And, fundamentally, you have to reject the illusion of potential. Real cognitive change is hard work. Instead of buying some quick-fix brain training app, dedicate your practice time to the actual skill you want to acquire.
It seems like it all boils down to intellectual humility.
That's the key. Recognize your cognitive limitations, and then use objective structures, external data, and systems to keep your confident storytelling brain in check.
Just knowing that our own minds can be our greatest source of unreliability. That feels like the single most powerful realization you can walk away with. Understanding these trade-offs is really the first step toward making truly informed, rational decisions in your life.
Exactly. These insights aren't really about finding bugs in the mind. They're about understanding the user manual for a highly efficient but very particular cognitive system. By knowing where our awareness fails, we can strategically focus our efforts where they'll actually matter the most.
For a concise visual overview of these psychological illusions, see the mini explainer linked in the description for The Invisible Gorilla.